never believed in ghosts. I want to make that clear before I tell you what happened, because I know how this sounds. I know you're already sitting there with your arms crossed, half smiling, thinking, here we go. Another person who claims they saw something they can't explain. And I get it, I was you. For 34 years of my life, I was exactly you. My name is Daniel Marsh. I'm an accountant. I drive a sensible car. I pay my taxes on time, and I've never once read a horoscope without rolling my eyes. I am by every measurable standard the least mystical person you will ever meet. And yet, it started the way most terrible things do, quietly and with the best of intentions. I moved into the apartment on Kreller Street in late October. 3rd floor, Unit 3C. The building was old, 1920s construction, all dark brick and heavy iron railings. But the rent was absurdly low for the neighborhood, and I'd just gone through a divorce that had left my finances looking like a crime scene. I needed cheap. I needed quiet. I needed a place to rebuild. The landlord, a heavyset man named Gerald Potts, showed me the unit on a Tuesday afternoon. He was pleasant enough, if a little stiff. He kept his hands clasped behind his back as he walked me through the rooms like a museum docent presenting an exhibit he'd grown tired of. Previous tenant? I asked, noticing a few personal items still on the shelves. A ceramic mug, a small framed photo turned face down, a stack of paperback novels with cracked spines. Gerald cleared his throat. She left in a hurry. Some things got left behind. I'll have them cleared out before you move in. She moved somewhere nearby? A pause, just half a second too long. Now, I honestly couldn't say, he said, and turned to show me the bathroom. I should have pushed. I didn't. The first week was fine. Better than fine, actually. The apartment was bigger than anything I'd had in years. The walls were thick enough that I could barely hear my neighbors, and there was a window in the bedroom that caught the morning light in a way that almost made me feel hopeful again. I unpacked my boxes, set up my desk, learned which floorboards creaked, and which radiator pipe knocked at 2 a.m. The normal rhythm of a new place. Then, on the 8th night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone immediately, with the absolute bone-deep certainty that someone was standing at the foot of my bed. There wasn't. I turned on the light, and the room was empty. I checked the closet, checked under the bed out of some embarrassing instinct, found nothing. Told myself it was a dream. Went back to sleep. The next night, 3:17 again. Same feeling, same certainty, same empty room. I'm a logical man. I researched it. There's a documented phenomenon called a hypnagogic hallucination, a kind of sensory ghost that appears in the space between waking and sleeping. The brain misfires. It happens to lots of people. It feels completely real and means absolutely nothing. I told myself that. Every night for 2 weeks, I told myself that. Then the smell started. It was a Tuesday when I first noticed it, a faint, floral, almost sweet, like perfume but old. The kind of scent that clings to vintage clothing or the inside of a grandmother's jewelry box. I assumed it was cut from the unit below mine or drifting in through a vent. I opened a window and forgot about it, but it came back. Always at night. Always in the hallway between the bedroom and the bathroom. Always strongest right outside the linen closet. I checked the closet. Spare blankets, towels, a box of my own winter clothes. Nothing that could account for the smell. I pulled everything out, checked the walls for mold, found nothing. My neighbor across the hall, a quiet woman in her 60s named Patrice, knocked on my door one evening to return a package that had been delivered to her by mistake. I mentioned the smell, casually, the way you mention something you're not quite ready to take seriously. She went very still. "Lavender," I said, "like old lavender perfume. Does it come up through the vents sometimes, or but?" "I wouldn't open that closet if I were you," she said. She handed me the package and went back to her apartment before I could respond. I stood in my doorway for a long moment, holding a box of printer paper, staring at her closed door. I knocked an hour later. She didn't answer, even though I could see the light under her door and hear the television inside. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I've replayed it so many times that I'm afraid of letting it become a story, something shaped and edited by memory into something more dramatic than it was. So I'll just tell you exactly what I experienced in order. It was a Friday night in mid-November. I'd been working late, and I finally closed my laptop around midnight. I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and walked back down the hallway toward the bedroom. The linen closet door was open. I had not opened it. I stood there in the hallway, half asleep and confused, staring at the rectangle of darkness inside. I reached in, found the light pole, tugged it. On the back wall of the closet, a wall I had examined carefully, a wall I had pressed my hands against, looking for mold. Someone had written in black marker, "She comes back for what she left." The handwriting was small and careful, like someone who had taken their time. I called Gerald the next morning. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding like I'd woken him up. I told him what I'd found. There was a silence on the line that stretched long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "I'll send someone to paint over it," he said finally. Gerald? Who wrote that? Probably kids. The building had some vandalism issues a few years back. It's on the inside of a closet in a locked apartment. Another silence. "I'll send someone Monday," he said and hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, feeling something I hadn't felt since I was a child. A formless, crawling unease. The sense that the world around me had quietly shifted in the night, and I hadn't noticed until just now. I went back to the closet. I read the words again, then I looked around the closet more carefully than I had before, and that's when I noticed the floorboard. One of the boards in the back corner sat slightly higher than the others, a millimeter, maybe less. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been looking. I got a flathead screwdriver. I'm still not entirely sure why. Some part of me, the accountant part, the part that needs everything to balance, had decided that the only way to make this stop feeling like a nightmare was to find a rational explanation. And rational explanations live under floorboards and behind walls. They don't float, they don't breathe, they're just things. I pried up the board. Underneath, in a small hollow in the subfloor, was a metal tin about the size of a shoebox. Pale green, painted with small white flowers. Old. The kind of thing you'd find at an antique market. I lifted it out. It was lighter than I expected. I set it on the bathroom floor. I don't know why the bathroom, it just felt right to open it somewhere, with a door I could close behind me. And I sat cross-legged on the tile, and I opened it. Inside, a bundle of letters, tied with kitchen twine. A small brass key, a photograph, and a folded piece of paper on top of everything like a note left on a pillow. I unfolded the note first. It read, "If you found this, it's already too late to leave. I'm sorry. Don't read the letters. Don't use the key. Put this back and don't look for the door it opens. M." My hands, I noticed, were shaking. Her name was Margaret Elise Fowler. I know that because I read the letters. Of course I read the letters. I'm sorry, but I need you to understand. At this point, I was past rational. I was deep in the kind of desperate need to know that overtakes you when you're frightened and alone at midnight on a bathroom floor. The letters were written to someone named Thomas. Based on the dates, they spanned about 18 months, ending abruptly. They were love letters, mostly. Beautiful ones, actually. Full of the kind of raw honesty that people usually only manage in writing. But threaded through them, starting maybe 6 months in, was something else. Margaret had started hearing things. The hallway makes sounds at night that I can't account for, she wrote in one letter. Not the building settling, not the pipes, something that moves. I've started leaving the light on, and later, I found a door, Thomas, in the basement. I don't know how I missed it all these months. It doesn't appear on any plans Gerald gave me. It has a padlock, and the wood around it is wet, even when it hasn't rained. I asked Gerald about it and he went pale. He told me to forget I saw it. He said some parts of the building were sealed for structural reasons. I don't believe him. And then, near the end, I used the key I shouldn't have. I don't want to write what I found because writing it makes it real, and I need it to not be real for just a little while longer. I've hidden this tin for whoever comes next. Don't come looking for me, Thomas. Whatever you do, whatever anyone tells you, don't come looking. The last letter had no date. It was only 3 sentences. It knows I'm leaving. It won't let me. There's someone standing in the hallway and it has my face. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room with every light on, the tin on the coffee table in front of me, and I thought about what a sane person would do. A sane person would call the police, report a missing woman, hand over the letters, go back to bed on it. But Margaret's note had said it's already too late to leave, and I couldn't stop thinking about that. Because I had been in this apartment for over 3 weeks. I had been waking up at 3:17 every night. I had been smelling lavender in the hallway. Whatever Margaret had stirred up, if I believed any of this, I had been living inside it without even knowing. Had it already found me? I looked at the photograph for a long time. It showed a woman in her mid-30s, dark-haired, standing in front of what I recognized as the window in my bedroom. My bedroom, the one with the good morning light. She was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that it doesn't quite reach the eyes. She looked tired. She looked like someone in the middle of understanding something she wished she didn't have to understand. On the back of the photograph, in the same small, careful handwriting as the closet wall, this is what I look like. Remember it. If you see me again, if something that looks like me comes to your door, don't let it in. I put the photograph face down on the table. I sat there until the sun came up. The key was brass, old, with a simple bow and a long barrel, the kind that opens a padlock. I told myself I wasn't going to the basement. I told myself this firmly and repeatedly all through the following day, which I spent going through the completely ordinary motions of a normal life. I made coffee, I answered emails, I called my sister and talked for 45 minutes about nothing in particular, clinging to the sound of her voice like a rope. At 11 p.m., I picked up the key and walked downstairs. The basement of 14 Kreller Street smelled like cold concrete and old water. A single bulb burned at the bottom of the stairs, throwing more shadow than light. The walls were bare brick. Exposed pipes ran the length of the ceiling like metal veins. Storage units lined both walls, most of them padlocked, some of them empty and open. And at the far end, half hidden behind a large water heater, exactly where Margaret had described it, a door. It was smaller than a standard door, maybe 5 feet tall, set directly into the brick. The wood was dark and swollen looking, like it had been wet for a long time. The padlock on it was heavy, the kind you'd find on a storage unit or a shipping container. Rust had crept up from the hasp. I stood in front of it for a long time. Every nerve in my body was telling me to go back upstairs. Not the vague discomfort of someone doing something mildly ill-advised, but a deep animal alarm, the kind your body produces when it's identified a threat before your mind has caught up. My heart was hammering, my mouth was dry. The hair on my arms was standing up. I put the key in the padlock. It turned. The padlock opened. I pulled the door. Here is what was on the other side of that door. A room. Maybe 12 feet square. No windows. The same bare brick walls. The floor was old wood, and in the center of the floor someone had placed a chair. In the chair sat a woman. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, her head slightly bowed, as if she had fallen asleep waiting. Dark hair, mid-30s, dressed in the kind of clothes you'd wear around the apartment on a weekend. Jeans, a gray sweater. Even before she raised her head, I knew. She looked exactly like the photograph. Margaret Elise Fowler raised her head and looked at me, and her eyes. This is the part I have the hardest time describing. Her eyes were wrong. Not in a way I can point to and name, just wrong. The way a word looks wrong when you've stared at it too long. Like something was wearing her face from the inside and hadn't quite got the details right. She smiled. "You opened it," she said. Her voice was pleasant, normal, the voice of a woman who might ask you to pass the salt. I had no idea what I was going to say. "I knew you would," she said. "They always do." She stood up from the chair and I took a step back involuntarily, my shoulder hitting the door frame. She didn't come toward me. She just stood there, watching me with that slightly off smile. "You should go back upstairs," she said. "Lock your door. Don't open it again tonight, no matter what you hear." "Who are you?" I managed. Something moved across her face. Not quite pain, not quite grief. Something older than both. "I'm the reason the rent is cheap," she said. "I'm the thing that was here before the building, before any of this." She looked down at her hands. "She found me. She was curious like you. I've been wearing her ever since. She paused, tilting her head like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Not comfortable. Where is she? Where's Margaret?" The thing wearing Margaret's face looked at me for a long moment. "Somewhere quiet," it said. "She's not in pain. She's not anything anymore." My legs were moving before I'd made the decision to move them. I was backing through the door frame, into the basement, keeping my eyes on her. On it. The whole time. "Lock the door," it said, still in that pleasant voice. "Put the padlock back on, forget you have the key." It sat back down in the chair, folding its hands again. "I'll stay down here. I always stay down here, as long as the door stays locked. And if I don't lock it," my voice barely made it out. It looked at me for just a second, just a fraction of a second. Something slipped in those wrong eyes, and I saw something underneath. Something vast and lightless and infinitely patient, like looking down into a well that has no bottom. "Then I'll need somewhere else to stay," it said softly. "I'll need a new face." I locked the door. I moved out the next morning. I left everything. The furniture, the boxes, the printer paper that had been delivered to Patrice by mistake. I carried nothing but a bag with my laptop and my phone and my wallet, and I walked out of 14 Kreller Street at 6 a.m. While the street was still gray and quiet, I called Gerald from the sidewalk. He answered immediately as if he'd been awake and waiting. "You went downstairs," he said. It wasn't a question. "You knew," I said. "You knew when you rented me that apartment." A long silence. "The building has been in my family for 60 years, he said finally. "My grandfather sealed that room. For 40 years, the room stayed sealed and it stayed quiet. People could live here normally. Then Margaret found the door and she opened it and He stopped. "I should have told you. I know I should have told you." "What is it?" "I don't know. My grandfather called it a tenant. Said it had always been there, under the building. Said it had some kind of need. For contact, for faces, for being found. Said as long as it was sealed in, it could be contained." Another pause. He was right. For a long time. It told me Margaret isn't in pain. "I hope that's true," Gerald said quietly. He sounded like a man who'd been hoping things for a very long time. I hung up. I walked to the nearest coffee shop, sat in a corner, and stayed there until mid-morning when the world felt solid enough to move through again. That was 8 months ago. I live in a different apartment now. Newer building, higher rent, and I no longer begrudge a single dollar of it. I sleep through the night, mostly. I've stopped waking up at 3:17. The smell of lavender, if I encounter it anywhere, sends a cold spike of adrenaline through me that takes a while to fade. I've thought a lot about what I'd do differently. I'd have pushed Gerald harder the day he showed me the apartment. I'd have listened when Patrice told me not to open the closet. I'd have put Margaret's tin back under the floorboard and walked away from the whole thing without reading a single letter. But then Margaret's note had also said it was already too late to leave by the time I found the tin. And sometimes I wonder if it was already too late the moment I walked through the front door. If the building chose me somehow, if whatever is down in that basement sensed something in me, the curiosity, the stubbornness, the accountant's need for every column to balance and arrange things accordingly. I'd like to believe that's paranoid, that I stumbled into something random and found my way back out by luck. But here's the thing I haven't told anyone until right now. 3 weeks ago, I was in the coffee shop near my new apartment, a different coffee shop, miles away from Kreller Street. I was sitting by the window working, and I looked up for no particular reason. There was a woman standing on the sidewalk, looking at me through the glass. Dark hair, mid-30s, wearing a gray sweater. She smiled when she saw me looking, a pleasant, normal smile, and her eyes were wrong. By the time I got to the door and pushed through it, she was gone. The sidewalk in both directions was empty, just cold autumn air and the sound of traffic and my own breathing, too fast, too loud. She hadn't been there long enough to go anywhere. She had just stopped being there. I keep the lights on now, all of them, all night. I don't know what that does exactly, probably nothing. But it's the only thing that makes the dark feel smaller, and some nights, most nights, smaller is enough. If you ever find yourself looking at a door you don't remember, with a key that fits a lock you can't explain, don't open it. Walk away. Leave the building. Leave the street. Leave everything behind if you have to. Because some things are patient. Some things have been waiting longer than cities have stood or families have lived or any of us have had names. And they are very, very good at finding curious people.